The 63rd floor of the Sterling Global Tower was a monument to a specific kind of power, the kind that was silent, cold, and immaculately clean. The air itself smelled of lemon-scented polish and ambition, a sterile aroma that clung to the back of the throat. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view of the city, a sprawling empire of steel and glass that seemed to exist solely for the pleasure of the man in the corner office. In that office, behind a door of frosted glass and polished steel, Mr. Alastair Sterling was currently engaged in the meticulous act of dismantling his assistant's composure. His voice, a low, controlled blade, did not need to be raised. Its very calmness was the instrument of the dissection. Lisa, a woman whose efficiency was usually her shield, stood with a tablet clutched to her chest like a life preserver, her face a pale mask of barely contained terror. The source of this terror was not a crashed market or a hostile takeover, but a single, impending telephone call. The point, Lisa, the entire and only point of your employment, is to anticipate problems and make them disappear before they ever reach my desk, Sterling said, his words precise and icy. He did not look at her. Instead, he stared out at the skyline he owned a significant portion of, his reflection a perfect, impatient silhouette against the clouds. Mr. Chin does not get the translator is sick. Mr. Chin, who is worth more to this company than the building it is housed in, expects perfection. He expects seamless, flawless execution. He does not expect to be greeted by the sound of you having a quiet panic attack on the other end of the line. Lisa tried to form a word, a defense, but none came. The translator agency had called 20 minutes ago. Their best Mandarin specialist, the one who had been prepped for weeks on the nuances of this deal, had acute food poisoning. There was no backup. The call was due in 10 minutes. The weight of this failure was a physical pressure on her lungs. Unnoticed by either of them, a figure moved in the hallway beyond the open door. Samuel worked with a rhythm that was both slow and deeply efficient, a lifetime of motion refined into its most essential parts. The soft whisper of his microfiber mop moving in wide, deliberate arcs was the only sound he made. He was a man in his late 50s, his hair more silver than black, his face lined with the gentle map of a life that had not been easy, but had been lived with care. His dark blue uniform was crisp and clean, a point of personal pride. He knew every scuff mark on this floor's Italian marble, every whisper of the ventilation system, the specific way the afternoon light would hit the far wall at 3:17 p.m. He was, in his own way, the true master of this environment, its unseen caretaker. He heard the tension in Mr. Sterling's voice, saw the rigid set of Lisa's shoulders, and he understood the ecosystem of crisis that existed here. It was not his place to understand the details, only to navigate around the disruption it caused. He continued his work, a ghost in the machine of high finance, polishing the gleaming floor right up to the threshold of the office where fortunes were made and broken. The phone on Lisa's desk rang. It was not the harsh, internal buzz of a normal line, but a distinct, melodic chime that had been programmed for one caller and one caller only. The sound seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Lisa's eyes widened in pure, unadulterated fear. She looked at Sterling, who shot her a look of such venomous expectation that she physically flinched. She had to answer it. She stumbled to her desk, fumbling for the headset, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. She took a deep, shaky breath and pressed the answer button. Sterling Global Executive Office, Lisa speaking, she said, her voice an octave too high. The voice on the other end was immediate, a fluid, rapid stream of Mandarin. It was the voice of an elderly man, but it carried the effortless authority of someone who had been giving orders that were obeyed for half a century. Lisa's 5 phrases of Mandarin, painstakingly learned from an app, evaporated from her mind instantly. She was lost at sea. Hello? Mr. Chin? One moment, please, she stammered in English, her desperation palpable. Her wild, frantic eyes scanned the empty, opulent hallway for salvation for anyone. They landed on the only other person present, Samuel, who had paused his mopping to look up at the sound of her distress. In that moment of absolute panic, logic abandoned her. A desperate, absurd thought flashed through her mind. He's everywhere. He hears everything. Maybe he's picked something up. It was the logic of a drowning person grasping at a straw. Without a second thought, she ripped the headset from her ears and practically threw it at Samuel, who caught it out of pure reflex. Please, she whispered, her voice a tight, terrified hiss. Just talk. Say anything. Keep him on the line. Just 1 minute. Samuel held the sleek, black headset, looking from Lisa's petrified face to the device in his hand, a strange and alien object in his work-roughened palm. It was at that exact moment that Alistair Sterling decided to emerge from his office to personally oversee the disaster. And the scene that greeted him was one that bypassed his rationality and went straight to the core of his pride. His highly paid university-educated assistant was standing helplessly, and his janitor, a man he passed every day without seeing, was holding the direct line to his most valuable client. The violation of the natural order of his world was so profound it left him speechless for a split second. Then the fury arrived. His face, usually a mask of cool detachment, darkened with a flush of anger. "What in God's name are you doing?" he snarled, his voice losing all its practiced control. He crossed the space in 3 long strides and violently snatched the headset from Samuel's hand. "Get away from there. Lisa, have you lost your mind?" He jammed the headset onto his own head, turning his back on both of them. "Mr. Chin? Alistair Sterling here. My deepest apologies, you've had a most unprofessional welcome." He launched into the Mandarin he'd been rehearsing for weeks. It was stilted, awkward, and heavily accented. He used the wrong tone on a critical word, accidentally implying he thought Mr. Chen was being difficult rather than diligent. He spoke too fast, trying to project confidence but instead sounding impatient and rude. He butchered a customary greeting of respect, reducing it to a crude transactional phrase. On the other end of the line there was a silence. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a great mountain regarding a pebble that had just been insolently thrown at it. Sterling, sensing the profound offense he had just given, felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. The call ended a moment later, not with a courteous goodbye, but with a soft, definitive click. The silence in the office was now absolute and deafening. Sterling slowly removed the headset. He placed it on Lisa's desk with a terrifying quietness. He had been hung up on. He, Alistair Sterling, had been dismissed. The humiliation was a fire in his veins. He needed a reason, a target, something to absorb the cataclysmic failure of the last 3 minutes. His gaze swept over Lisa, who looked like she was about to be sick, and then it landed on Samuel. The janitor had not moved. He stood there, his mop still in hand, his expression unreadable. To Sterling that calmness was an accusation. This man was the spark that had set the whole disaster in motion. His presence was the contamination. He took a step toward Samuel, and when he spoke, his voice was low, dripping with a contempt so intense it was almost quiet. "You," he said. "Look at you. Standing there." He didn't need to raise his voice. Everyone on the floor was frozen, pretending not to listen. "Do you have any idea what you've just cost me? What your interruption might have just destroyed?" Samuel opened his mouth, perhaps to explain, perhaps to apologize, but Sterling cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No. Don't speak. I don't want to hear a word from you. Your job is to clean. To be silent. To be invisible. It is not to touch things you cannot possibly comprehend, to distract my staff, to insert yourself into matters that are so far above your station it would be laughable if it weren't so catastrophically stupid." He let the words hang in the air, letting their poison sink in. "This client, this deal, is worth more than you will earn in 1,000 of your lifetimes. And you almost broke it because you were somewhere you shouldn't have been. Now get out of my sight. Get back to your cleaning. And if I ever see you near this office again when you aren't explicitly required to be, you will be looking for a new job. Do you understand me?" Samuel's eyes met Sterling's for a brief second. There was no anger in them, no shame. There was something else, something deep and unreadable that Sterling, in his rage, did not even try to interpret. Then Samuel simply nodded, a small, slow dip of his head. He turned, placed his mop carefully back into its bucket, and pushed his cart down the hallway, the soft squeak of its wheels the only sound in the profound silence. He had understood every single word Mr. Chen had initially said, and he had understood the grave insult in Mr. Sterling's poor reply. But that was a truth that belonged only to him, hidden behind the humble facade of the cleaner. The grand clock that dominated the atrium of Sterling Global had long since chimed the hour, its sonorous tones echoing through a space that was now largely deserted. The frantic energy of the day had bled away, replaced by the hollow, silent hum of a building in repose. The cleaning crews had come and gone, their industrial buffers leaving the marble floors gleaming under the dimmed, overnight lighting. Only one figure remained, a solitary point of motion in the vast stillness. Samuel moved through the executive wing with a keyring that held the intimate access of the unseen, his footsteps the only sound breaking the profound quiet. His mind was not on the afternoon's humiliation. Such moments were ephemeral, gusts of wind that rattled the windows of the powerful but passed over him, leaving no lasting mark. His focus was on the task, on the simple, satisfying geometry of a clean line left by a damp mop on a dry floor, on the eradication of the day's dust and disorder. He worked with a meditative rhythm, a man at peace in his purpose, each swipe of the cloth, each emptying of a bin a small ritual of restoration. He saved Mr. Sterling's office for last, a habit born of the knowledge that the CEO was often the last to leave. He used his key and pushed the door open, the space within feeling even larger and more imposing in the darkness, lit only by the ambient glow of the city skyline beyond the windows. The office was a testament to a life of acquisition. Awards, framed magazine covers featuring a smugly confident Alistair Sterling, and expensive but soulless art adorned the walls. The air still held a faint, acrid trace of expensive cologne and frustration. Samuel's practiced eyes scanned the room, not admiring the wealth but cataloging the work. The discarded coffee cup on the desk, the crumpled memo by the trash can, the faint smudge of a fingerprint on the glass tabletop. He moved to the desk, his movements efficient and respectful. He would never rifle through drawers or read papers. His was a code of silent, professional trust. He collected the cup, retrieved the memo ball, and began wiping down the vast, empty surface of the desk, erasing the physical evidence of the day's turmoil. It was then that the phone rang. The sound was shockingly loud, a jarring violation of the deep silence. It was the same distinctive, melodic chime that had caused such panic hours earlier. Samuel paused, his cloth hovering over the wood. He looked at the phone, its sleek lines and muted lights seeming almost aggressive in the quiet room. It was not his place. It was the furthest thing from his place. His mandate was to clean, to remain unseen and unheard, to be a ghost in the machine. To answer the phone, especially this phone, was to cross a boundary so fundamental it was practically written into the architecture of the building itself. The ringing stopped. Samuel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and resumed his work. A moment later, it began again, insistent, persistent, a sound that would not be ignored. It rang a third time, a fourth. This was not a wrong number. This was someone who expected an answer, someone for whom the concept of after hours did not apply. A new thought, cold and pragmatic, inserted itself into Samuel's mind. Mr. Sterling was volatile, a man of immense pride. If this was Mr. Chin calling again and the call went unanswered, the blame would not land on the absent CEO. It would inevitably find its way to Lisa, the assistant. Samuel had seen the fear in her eyes, the weight of her position. She had a family, a mortgage, a life that could be shattered by one more mark against her in Sterling's ledger. Her desperate act of handing him the phone, while foolish, had been a cry for help from someone drowning. The relentless ringing was a siren call of potential disaster, not for the billionaire, but for the salaried employee just trying to survive in his orbit. The moral calculation for Samuel was simple. The risk of his own reprimand was preferable to the near certainty of hers. With a resolve that straightened his shoulders, he reached out and pressed the blinking button on the phone base, lifting the receiver to his ear. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm and low in the empty office. "Sterling Global." The voice on the other end was indeed Mr. Chen's, but the fluid, authoritative tone from earlier was gone. It was now laced with a sharp, bristling impatience, the sound of a profoundly important man whose time was being disrespected. He spoke in rapid, irritated Mandarin, not waiting for a greeting. "Sterling, I have been waiting for 40 minutes. The documents were to be sent to my office in Shanghai before close of business here. My legal team is sitting idle. This is an unacceptable delay. Is your word worth so little?" The anger was clear, but beneath it, Samuel, with his fluent understanding, heard something else. The meticulous frustration of a man whose entire world operated on precision and honor, and who perceived its absence as a deep personal insult. Samuel did not react to the anger. He did not stammer or become defensive. He shifted his posture slightly as if out of respect for the voice on the phone, and when he replied, it was in the same dialect of Mandarin, but his tone was profoundly different from Sterling's earlier attempt. It was measured, respectful, and infused with the formal honorifics and subtle cadences of one who truly understood the language and the culture it represented. "Mr. Chin, my most sincere apologies for this inconvenience," he said, his voice a placid lake to Chen's stormy sea. "This is not Mr. Sterling. My name is Samuel. I am assisting in the office this evening. Mr. Sterling is unfortunately unavailable at this precise moment. Please allow me to assist you. You mentioned documents for your legal team in Shanghai." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The impatience was halted, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. The voice that replied was slower, more measured, laced with curiosity. You are not Sterling. Your Mandarin, it is flawless. It is from the Beijing dialect, but with the elegance of a classical education. Who are you? Samuel sidestepped the personal inquiry with humble grace. I am merely someone who can help, sir. You require the finalized contract documents, specifically the exhibits concerning the intellectual property licensing clauses. Is that correct? He recalled the specific terminology from the drafts he'd seen in the trash, memorized not through intent, but through a lifetime habit of absorbing information. Mr. Chen, now thoroughly intrigued, confirmed this. Samuel, his eyes scanning the otherwise pristine desk, noticed a single yellow sticky note stuck to the side of the monitor, nearly hidden. On it, in Lisa's handwriting, was a password, S-Corp IP transfer. It was likely the key to the secure server where such documents were held. Sir, if you would permit me a moment of your patience, I believe I can direct the team to send those documents immediately, Samuel said. The delay is a technical error, not a reflection on Mr. Sterling's commitment to this partnership. Your time is valued immensely. He spoke not as a subordinate, but as a peer acknowledging the weight of another's time. He guided Mr. Chen through the process, using the password to verbally instruct a bewildered but compliant IT staffer on duty to push the files through, all while maintaining his calm, respectful dialogue with the client. He clarified a point of confusion regarding Section 4B, quoting the clause from memory and explaining its standard legal implication in a way that was both clear and reassuring. By the end of the 5-minute conversation, Mr. Chen's irritation had completely vanished, replaced by a tone of deep respect and genuine appreciation. Samuel, you have been most helpful. You have saved a great deal of difficulty. Please ensure Mr. Sterling is informed that the matter is resolved. And, thank you. The line went dead, this time with a sense of closure and satisfaction. Samuel replaced the receiver. The office was silent once more. The only change was the absence of the ringing phone. He finished wiping the desk, erased the password from the sticky note with his thumb, and disposed of it. He completed his work in the office, leaving it perfectly ordered as if he had never been there at all. He turned off the light and closed the door, locking it behind him. The incident was a closed loop, existing only in his memory and, he assumed, in the satisfied mind of a client thousands of miles away. He pushed his cart toward the service elevator, his work for the night complete, unaware that his actions had just anchored a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars and set in motion an inevitable and profound collision of two very different worlds. The morning sun that streamed into the 63rd floor of Sterling Global was of a different quality than it had been the day before. It was not the harsh, interrogating light of crisis, but a softer, golden glow that seemed to expose dust motes dancing in the air and the faint, lingering scent of overnight polish. Alistair Sterling arrived not with the frenetic energy of a man putting out fires, but with the buoyant, self-satisfied stride of a conqueror. The email had arrived just as he was finishing his breakfast, a succinct, perfectly composed message from Mr. Chen himself, confirming the receipt of all documents and his satisfaction with the finalized terms. The deal, the monumental, company-defining deal, was sealed. Sterling's reflection in the elevator doors had smirked back at him. He had done it. His forceful personality, his relentless drive, had clearly pushed through the minor hiccup of yesterday's call and secured victory. He found Lisa already at her desk, her posture still tense with the anticipation of fallout. "Lisa," he announced, his voice booming with uncharacteristic geniality. "We're back on track. Chen's people have confirmed everything. A little persistence, a firm hand, that's all it ever takes." He gave her a magnanimous smile. "I know it got a bit heated yesterday, but you see? It all worked out. My call with him, once I got through the initial confusion, must have done the trick." Lisa, however, did not look relieved. She looked deeply, profoundly confused. "Your call, sir?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I pulled the call log for the secure line. After you left yesterday evening, there was one inbound call from Mr. Chen's office. It was answered at 9:03 p.m. It lasted for 6 minutes and 14 seconds. She paused, swallowing hard. "The building's access log shows that your keycard was used to exit the garage at 7:15 p.m., sir. You weren't here." Sterling's smile did not vanish so much as it froze, solidifying on his face like a mask. The triumph in his eyes flickered, replaced by a slow, dawning confusion. "That's impossible," he stated, but the certainty was already leaching from his voice. "There must be a mistake. A glitch in the system." Lisa, emboldened by his confusion and her own desperate need to understand, pressed on. "The security feed from the hallway outside, It shows that the only person who entered or exited this office suite after 8 p.m. was... She couldn't bring herself to say the name. Instead, she turned her monitor slightly. On the black and white video, a figure in dark janitorial blues could be seen using a key to enter the executive office at 8:58 p.m. He exited again at 9:09 p.m. It was unmistakably Samuel. The frozen smile on Sterling's face finally shattered. The pieces of his triumphant narrative were spinning wildly, refusing to coalesce into a picture that made sense. The janitor. The man he had publicly shamed and belittled. The man he had deemed invisible, incapable of comprehending the high-stakes world that happened around him. That man had been in his office. That man had answered the most important phone line in the company. And somehow, that interaction had not blown the deal into a million pieces but had, according to the email sitting in his inbox, solidified it. The cognitive dissonance was a physical pain, a roaring in his ears that drowned out the hum of the computers. He stared at the frozen image of Samuel on the screen, and for the first time he truly saw him. Not as a function, not as part of the building's utilities, but as a man. A man with a history, with knowledge, with capabilities that existed entirely outside of Sterling's understanding. A cold, sickening feeling of shame began to pool in his stomach, a feeling so foreign and uncomfortable he almost didn't recognize it. "Get him," he said, his voice hoarse. "Find him. Now." 20 minutes later, Samuel stood in the doorway of the corner office. He was still in his cleaning uniform, though it was fresh for the new day. He held his cap in his hands, his posture neither subservient nor defiant, but simply present. He looked at Sterling, then at Lisa, his expression as unreadable as it had been the day before. The office, which usually felt like Sterling's natural habitat, his throne room, now felt alien and accusatory. The awards on the wall seemed like cheap trinkets. The view of the city seemed to mock his myopia. Sterling did not know how to begin. The scripts of power and dominance he had always relied upon were useless here. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Please. Sit down." The word "please" felt strange in his mouth. Samuel sat, placing his cap neatly on his knee. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "There was a call," Sterling began, faltering. "Last night. From Mr. Chin." Samuel nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I took the liberty of answering it. It was ringing quite persistently. I was concerned it might be an emergency." Sterling just stared at him. The man's calm admission was utterly disarming. You spoke to him?" Another nod. "Yes, sir. He seemed upset about some documents that had not been sent. He mentioned his legal team was waiting in Shanghai." The roaring in Sterling's ears grew louder. "And you spoke to him in Mandarin?" This time Samuel's response was a simple, "Yes, sir." The simplicity of it was devastating. Sterling felt the foundation of his entire worldview crack. The question he had to ask next was the most difficult of his life. It required a humility he had never practiced. "Samuel, how is that possible?" For a long moment, Samuel looked out the window at the city where he was a ghost. Then he looked back at Sterling, and his eyes held a lifetime of stories. "I was not always a cleaner, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice soft but clear, every word measured and precise. "In my country I was a professor of linguistics and Eastern philosophy at the university. I taught Mandarin, Cantonese, and the classical texts. My wife fell ill. The treatments were expensive. We lost everything. Then the political situation became unstable. We were granted asylum here, but my degrees, my certifications, they were not recognized. A man must feed his family. This job, it is honest work. It provides." He said it without a trace of bitterness, as a simple statement of fact. "I have always believed that what you do to earn your living does not define who you are. It merely provides the means to live. Who you are is defined by how you treat those who can do nothing for you." The words landed in the silent room with the weight of centuries. Sterling felt them strip away every layer of his ego, his arrogance, his carefully constructed identity. He saw the afternoon before with horrifying clarity. Himself berating a university professor, a man who had lost everything for love, a man of profound learning and deeper character, calling him useless over a perceived slight he himself had caused. The shame was now complete and overwhelming. He stood up from his imposing leather chair, the symbol of his power, and walked around the desk. He did not offer a hand. He did not try to bluster or justify. He looked Samuel in the eye, and for the first time in his adult life, Alistair Sterling truly apologized. "Samuel," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "I have behaved abominably. I judged you with the deepest ignorance and treated you with a disrespect I am now profoundly ashamed of. You saved this company's most important relationship after I had nearly destroyed it. You did it with a grace and intelligence I clearly lack. My apology is inadequate, but it is genuine. I'm sorry. Deeply and truly sorry. He returned to his chair, the gesture of power now feeling hollow. I will not insult you by offering you money, he said, but I am offering you a choice. The position of head of international relations is yours. Your wisdom, your languages, your understanding, this company needs it. I need it. Or if you prefer, I will provide a reference that will open any door at any university in this city for you. The choice is yours. Samuel listened, his hands still folded over his cap. He looked from the humbled billionaire to the city beyond and then back again. He saw not a powerful man offering a gift, but a man who had finally, painfully begun to learn. After a long moment he gave a small, gracious nod. A new challenge would be welcome, he said. I accept the position. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. It was not a thank you for the job. It was a thank you for the apology, for the hard-won recognition of his humanity. Sterling understood the difference. The story of the janitor who saved the billionaire's deal became a quiet legend in the business world, but the real story, the one about the humility and the apology, was known only to a few. Samuel went on to forge deeper, more respectful relationships with Sterling Global's international partners than anyone thought possible, because he understood that business, like life, was built not on transactions but on respect. And Alistair Sterling, though he remained a formidable businessman, never again looked at the people who cleaned his office or served his coffee the same way. He had learned that the most important lessons often come from the most unexpected teachers, and that the true measure of a person is found not in their title but in their character. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected wisdom and redemption, of seeing the value in every person, consider subscribing for more tales that explore the profound moments hidden in everyday life. Your support helps us continue to share stories that remind us of the power of humility and the importance of a simple, genuine apology. Subscribe now.